Alright, hey, it's Travis. This is not a C Sharp developer diary video. This is actually going to be a quick, hopefully 6 minutes or shorter video that's intended to help other adult learners or maybe adolescent learners who are trying to teach themselves to code but are maybe struggling with some of the basic foundational concepts. I'm in a couple different adult learner networks for Python. Even though I'm not working actively on it, I'm still reading and learning about it. For C Sharp and for generally learning programming. And this is something that I've seen come up over and over again. People struggling with the concept of the for and the while loop with ifs and thens and switch cases. And honestly, we learn better when we get to teach it. So I'm going to go over in just a couple minutes the concept of the for loop because it was hard for me and I've seen it come up recently. And I'm going to show how it's written in code in Python and then also give you an object lesson in with a deck of cards to show you how you can maybe programmatically think about it. So in Python, a for loop, just like in C Sharp's for each loop, you are pausing the top-down, left-to-right execution of code so that something can happen, whether it's counting or loading or sorting or just iterating over an array to search for something. A for loop pauses the execution of the code until or when a condition is met, and you specify what that condition is. Most languages, or as far as I know, all coding languages have something like a for loop, but they may be called something slightly different in the different languages. I'm going to focus on Python because the adult learners that I'm working with this is where they have a little bit of a bugbear using the for loop. But anything I say here transitions pretty evenly into C Sharp's for each loop as well, because they're basically the same. Just beware, the for loop in C Sharp, very different than the for loop in Python. So we have a couple key components to a for loop in Python. First of all, we have a temporary variable I. It doesn't matter what you call it. It's not coded back into the rest of the program. It's only used to refer to whatever the current thing the program is looking at and iterating over is. This I, it could be movies, it could be Buffalo Bills. It doesn't matter. Generally, you can leave it I. In C Sharp, I've learned that outer shell for loops use I and inner shells use J or K, whatever. It doesn't really matter, but you need to have for a variable name, a temporary variable name, in whatever the thing is that you are going to be looking at. In this case, I have for I in range 0 to 52. This is the first element, and this is the last exclusive element, meaning it won't actually count to 52. It will only count to 51, but because of the way that computers count, 0 is 1. So if I run this real quick, you'll see that the first number that it spit out at me is 52. So my card counter using the for loop counts 52 cards out of the deck. And what that means is if we come back over here, for each card in this deck, I want to raise my card counter by 1. So for the first one, I get 1. For the next card, I add another 1, so I get 2. For the next card, I add another card, and I get 3, and so forth until the entire deck has been drawn. That's the essentials of a for loop. You're basically saying for each thing in whatever collection that I have is, for each card in my deck, I want you to do something. But we can actually specify more, and that's what these other variables that I've written up here are for. In this case, I have my card counter, right? That's not going to be a factor, so I'm going to comment that out. But I do have my even counter and my odd counter. So in this case, for I in range, again, 0 to 52, that's a kind of easy, low-hanging fruit way to model out a deck of cards. I'm saying whatever that number is, I am now going to assign it to a random integer between 0 and 10. And I picked that kind of to model the basic card value in blackjack. You could do this however you want, but for the sake of a simple, clean instructional tutorial, this will work. So every time that I draw a card off of my deck, I'm going to assign it a value so that it simulates kind of a card deck. So whatever this first one is, I first have to roll with random.randint, and now I get a value. And then I've made it a little bit more complicated. I've said if I modulo 2 is equal to 0, or if I divided by 2 has a remainder of 0, that means it's even. I'm going to increase my even counter by 1. Else, meaning in any other case, if I is not divisible by 2, then I'm going to raise that odd counter by 1. So I'll get an even and an odd counter. So in this case, I need to print my even counter, and I need to print my odd counter. And I did not wrap those in parentheses, and that needs to be like that. Okay, here we go. So right away, it's going to count, and out of those 2 draws, I got 31 even cards and 21 odd cards. Now that's not a perfect deck of cards because I didn't actually code in the different values. I didn't say there are only so many 10s and 2s and 3s and 4s. It's just a straight random roll. But you can see that using a for loop allows you to calculate. How do I get that back? Come back. Get out of here, terminal. There it is. Oops, I missed the X. It allows you to quickly iterate over a large body of information. You could do that to search for prime numbers. You could do that to search for any number that's divisible by 412, whatever you want to do. That's what a for loop is for. It pauses the top-down execution of the code going top-down, left to right like normal, and it makes it iterate through a collection or an array or a list or a tuple or whatever so that you can either count information, search through it, or sort it, or whatever. You could just as easily, well, it would require a little bit more coding. You could just easily say, if it's a black card, I want it to go to the left. If it's a red card, I want it to go to the right. That's what that for loop is for. You just need to be aware of the key components in it, and I'm trying to wrap this up before 8 minutes. That I here, this I variable, that is entirely arbitrary, whatever you call it. Try to keep it relevant so that if you come back in 2 weeks, you know what it's referring to. But if you want to just leave it as I, as a kind of temporary variable, that also works. And then you can do things with those I's. You can nest if and else's, you can nest another for loop, you could nest another while loop, you can do a whole bunch. But the key here is to give you the idea, the structure, and then encourage you to go play with it. Go create some sort of list or string that you can iterate through and practice writing it and using it, because once you start building a larger application, you're going to be using for loops a lot. So you don't want to be afraid of them. You want to be confident when you use them. That's it. If you want more quick little programming tutorials like this from another learner, from a teacher, you can subscribe and leave comments or whatever below. But I hope that this helps somebody, because I know this was a real pain in my rear end when I was learning it. So that's it. Adios.